Welcome to order. Good morning. Meeting will come to order. We'll start with, is there a motion to waive the reading of the minutes from December 21st?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye, okay, so moved. Moving on to the agenda.
We have to approve
Oh, yeah,
the minutes.
I thought we did. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
So moved. All in favor? Aye, okay, meeting minutes have been approved. Moving on to public comments. Regarding the agenda, are there any public comments at this point?
I want to speak to the St. Aloysius discussion. I don't know if you'd like to hear from me now or after.
Would you? Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Amy Zavatakis. I'm the attorney for St. Aloysius Church in connection with their special permit application for the redevelopment of the church property. So I'm not actually entirely sure on the purpose of today's meeting in front of you all. Unfortunately, I just received notice of it late last night and was not asked to bring any information or to provide anything. So I did want to make myself available if you have any questions, but I did also, since I had this opportunity, wanted to correct a few things that I said the last time I was here, because since we last met, I've been doing some additional research in preparation for the planning and zoning hearing, which is expected on Tuesday. And came across this book in the St. Aloysius Church archives. It is a book that was printed on as part of their centennial celebrations. And I can make copies of, I can submit copies of pages of the book or make it available if anyone would like to review it. It is the only copy that I have though, so I can't just sort of hand it out. But what's interesting from this is a great deal of research was done into the church's history, as well as the construction of all of the buildings on the church property. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is that a couple of the dates that I gave you when we met last time are wrong. The church purchased the land in July 13th, 1907 for $4,200. And by the land, at that point, that was just the land at the corner of Maple and South. So just the lots, basically where the where Stapleton Hall sits. After purchasing the land, they continued to hold services on Forest Street, which was the original location of St. Aloysius Church. And then they built, once they raised some funds, they built Stapleton Hall, which was the church at that time. Stapleton Hall, they began construction in 1914 and it was completed and dedicated July 15th, 1917. And the reason what's interesting is that at the time that the church was built, the articles discussed the architect that designed the church, the builder, and mentioned the rectory of frame construction will stand in the rear of the church facing Maple Street. The rectory, which is what is 30 Maple Street, was then completed under the supervision of Father Moore on August 5th, 1917, at a cost of $8,000. So I think it's important that that information be corrected because the building was built in 1917, well after the end of the stick style phase, which has been referenced previously, and it was also built by the church. So any discussion of the prior owner of the land and anything that he was involved with doesn't have anything to do with this building. It was built in 1917. The priest lived in the house until 1985, at which point the priest moved in some apartments at the top floor of Stapleton Hall. And some of the nuns that were teaching at St. Aloysius Church moved into 30 Maple Street and lived there as their residence. And sometime in the late 90s, I've not been able to get it an exact date, but prior to 2000, the nuns moved out. And from then on, the church has been trying to figure out a way to use the building. As you heard from Mr. Mantilla at the last meeting, they've tried to hold meetings there, they've tried to hold religious education, and the building is unsound, it is not ADA accessible, and the rooms are these tiny, priest nun bedrooms and not really sized for any sort of meeting use. So I just wanted to make sure that that was all corrected for your files. Were there any questions?
So, as I understood you're suggesting that there was nothing on the site until the 30 Maple, until the rectory was completed on August 5th, 1917. Are you representing absolutely that it was empty lot prior to that time?
I'm not making any representation about what was on the lot prior to 1917. I am saying that the building that is 30 Maple Street was built from the ground up by the church and completed in 1917.
Is that stayed from the ground up? So you're suggesting that whatever was there before was torn down?
Again, I don't have any information on whether the lot was empty or whether there was a building there that was torn down, but this building was constructed by the church and completed in 1917.
It could have been a renovation of the building that was already there.
No, based on the documentation from when the Stapleton Hall was built, where it says that the rectory will be built, I believe that there was either nothing there. Again, I don't want to make any representations about information that I don't have, but this building was built by the church. That is clear from the documentation.
Well, the documentation is hearsay. You don't have anybody, you have nobody who can say that the church actually built it. Except that the record suggests that that's what happened. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know that there's anyone alive that's available. It was alive in 1917.
And there are no records from the town with respect to building.
These are the records from the church, the town records from the back end.
But you suggest that there is therefore no relevance to the way the building looks because it's after the so-called stick period?
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that the stick style nomenclature is for a very defined period of time that ended at approximately 1890. And since this building was built so long after 1890, it cannot be considered stick style. Now, is it an old building? Is it, have some said that it is attractive? Yes. However, the historic building on the site is Stapleton Hall, which we are preserving as part of this project.
I don't think you can say that that style ended in a particular day.
Everything that I have read concerning stick style construction states that it ended. That anything built after that is considered Queen Anne.
I don't think anybody would look at that building and think it's a Queen Anne building.
I'm simply reporting what I have researched. Again, I haven't had time to prepare all the documentation since I was not informed of this meeting. I just wanted to make sure that I gave you the details that I do have.
Well, my view would be that irrespective of what I would regard as an arbitrary date, much the same as 1890 is the arbitrary date, the end of the American West as frontier. It's an arbitrary date. Somebody has made that decision. If that building looks like a stick style building, which it apparently does, I'm not an architect, but if it looks like a stick style building and if people think it's a stick style building, it's you may as well say it's a stick style building irrespective of when it was built, and it's certainly more than 50 years prior to the time that you proposed to demolish it. And the question that I have, which we've been hopeful of discussing here, and we'd be happy to have you as part of the discussion, at least from my perspective, is there has been no suggestion whatever that the church has been willing to think about retaining this building for some purpose or putting any effort into retaining it for some purpose, irrespective of whether from somebody's perspective, it doesn't really fit in the plans of the church. That's from my perspective in terms of preserving historic buildings. That's an element, but it ain't determinative from my perspective. And so far, after we moved, we resolved as we did to impose the 90-day delay. And we have had, shall we say, notable silence from the church with respect to what, if anything, they have thought about or propose to do to preserve this building consistently with the goals of this committee and the best interests of town.
Well, there's been silence because there's been no request made for any additional documentation.
We,
If there's a request for documentation, I would happily receive it and provide you with the responses. I can tell you that we have, the church began looking into ways to rehabilitate this building and use it as part of the church programming beginning as early as 2000. And has tried to use it, has sought the advice of engineers and architects for ways to reconfigure the building, to make it meet current building codes, to make it ADA accessible, and have received responses consistently that it is not possible to rehabilitate this building in a way that will be useful for any of the church programmings. And as a nonprofit, the fact that the building would have to be the foundation completely rebuilt and the frame structure, a great portion of that completely rebuilt, cost prohibitive for a nonprofit such as a church. They have looked into it. They looked into it under Monsignor Shai, who was the first person to start looking into rehabilitating the church campus. And I specifically asked the architects that are working on the current project to look into, is there a way to rehabilitate the building, to relocate it and incorporate it into the current plans? And again, the answer has been unfortunately, there is not. It is too, the foundation was not well built at the time that it was built. There's the water incursions, and it's simply not a building that it is cost prohibitive for the church to even attempt to try to work on it. And there's no telling if they started to work on it, what might happen as far as the building.
What are you requesting of us?
I'm not requesting anything right now. I just wanted to, you had this item on the agenda. I saw it last night. And so I thought I would come to make myself available for any questions. And I also, because I was here, wanted to correct, because I did make some misstatements at the last meeting regarding the years because of the document. I didn't have this documentation at that time.
and I take it that your statements that you don't know anything about anything that's been done since the building was built in terms of rehabilitating it or keeping it up. You don't have any additional information.
I do know that there was some rehabilitation work done, I believe it was in the 50s, and that's referenced in the book as well, but that's the only additional information I've been able to find so far.
50s are a long time ago.
Agreed, and like I said, and the work that Monsignor Shai did in the 2000s to try to figure out a way to use it.
Well, my problem, and perhaps I share a common fault with you, I'm a lawyer. I take your representations, and I mean no disrespect to you, but everything you've represented as what you've been told what's been done, it ain't evidence, for one thing. And secondly, it's always easier and cheaper to knock something down than to put some effort into it. And there is absolutely nothing for us to decide with respect to your representations about what the church has done and how it's done, and whether it's cost prohibitive or not. I'm sure it'll be cheaper to knock the building down and to put asphalt over the spot, which is what I take it is the current plan, than to do something with it to preserve the quality of this practically unique building in the town.
And look, I understand that's your position. Like I said, the records are sparse from that time period, so I'm doing the best I can to provide information that isn't simply someone's statements. This is something that was written many years ago and very well researched. And I would say, I also do take issue with the fact that you say that the church is not doing what it can to preserve history. The church is preserving and has taken steps through the years to preserve Stapleton Hall. It is a beautiful building. It is in a very visible spot in the town of New Canaan. It's been the focus of photographs of New Canaan in the past, and the church is putting money into continuous renovation and upkeep of Stapleton Hall.
Well, I seem to recall the passage that says with God all things are possible, but I guess that ain't true when it comes to this building.
I think we need to look at this
Within reason, but we don't have anything that says it would cost us $250,000 to rehabilitate this, and here's what we have to do, and here's how it's done, and there's an architect who's prepared to sign it that says the building is unsafe, and so
Well,
we know such evidence.
I did submit the structural engineer's report at the last meeting. If there's specific documentation that, or specific reports that you'd like, please tell me and I will provide them. But as of today, I didn't, like I said, didn't even know this meeting was taking place until late yesterday. I was not asked to provide anything. I was not asked to appear here today. I just thought I would to provide you with any questions. But if there's a list of if there's information that you would like, I'll write it down right now and tell me what it is and I'll provide it.
I appreciate very much what you just said, and I mean no disrespect to you, and it's not criticism. But when the application was here before, the application was whether or not we should impose a 90-day suspension. And you knew about that then because you were here, you made a presentation. And that was the opportunity, it seems to me, for the church to come forward with such evidence as it might have had. The report you submitted, I will tell you, to me, is entirely conclusory. It's entirely conclusory without the facts that support it. The conclusions are only as good as the facts that support it, and the facts ain't there.
I'm confused. What facts are you looking for from a professional structural engineer and his investigation? Do you want his backup documents?
Well, I'd like those. Do you have a report from a structural engineer that says this building cannot be rehabilitated under any circumstance?
The report from the structural engineer which was submitted,
Three
I-
pages.
yes, states at its conclusion that the foundation would need to be rebuilt and much of the frame would need to be rebuilt.
And is there a cost attached to that?
We didn't ask him for that, but if you'd like to know what the cost would be, I can absolutely get that information.
Well, it seems to me that what we need to do, what you need to do is to demonstrate that in point of fact, it is impossible for the church to do necessary to preserve this very lovely building. Because once if this building comes down, that's 50% of the stick style, I'll call
All right, well, and I would like the record to reflect that I disagree if this is a state out of.
it. Well, those are arguments about what architects describe it as. I'm not one, you're not one. It looks like a stick style. It may not fall within the time period, but time periods in terms of discussions of style is Schubert a classical composer or is he a romantic? There's disagreement about that, and it has nothing to do with anything other than perspective and opinion. It looks like a stick style building.
I tend to agree on that point,
No, I'm
that
just,
whether it's.
Rose is in a town meeting. I just realized I could be watching it, see what she's up to.
I tend to agree on the point, whether it's literally a stick style or not. If it is a historic building, it is sensitively done, well proportioned. And I think a very good, solid addition to the townscape. I mean, that. And it's 1917, that's whatever, over 100 years. You know, so it's on that point, whether it's literally a stick style or not, I think it's, you know, less of a issue.
It's not,
It is really good at the.
it's not determined.
Right, I mean, there's a lot of derivative design that happened, that, you know, that stems from different styles and stuff. So, that's my main, comment is that, you know, it's a lovely contribution to the town. And, it sure would be nice to find a way to stay there.
It's like Marty is on.
Hello, everyone.
Maureen? Is there any other information that I can provide to you or any other documentation? Yeah, please.
I actually have an email, Minnie Finley had written the letter of objection. And we notified her also, same time of today's meeting, and I do apologize for that, it's just been busy. Okay, I'm going to read what she has, her statement, which I assume she wanted read. I'm hoping the HRC will invite the Catholic Church representative, the architect or the project manager, to have a conversation about reuses and solutions to problems mentioned in the structural report and adaptive reuse. Is it possible for us to, as a committee, meet with the architect?
If that's the request, certainly.
Yes.
Okay. So who should I speak with to schedule that meeting?
Yes, I'm the secretary, and email me, I'll give you my contact info.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There is, I'd have to describe it as kind of a void in the ordinance as to what happens after we impose a suspension. And that's unfortunate in a lot of ways. But I think the contemplation of the ordinance is that once the suspension is imposed, that there is a discussion, that there is some effort made. And it's not just, okay, well, they impose 90 days and we have to put the wrecking ball on ice for 90 days and then bombs away.
We're happy to make the architect available. Again, I've been waiting for someone to make a request for either information or a meeting, and so I'm happy to make them available.
The question, I think, is who has the burden of coming forward? And I think that's with you, not us.
Again, as I stated at the end of the meeting, that I'd be happy that I was waiting for you to make a request. So I apologize if that was misunderstood, but I haven't received any requests. But we're happy to make any documentation that you'd like available if you make the request, and any individuals from our team available.
That's great. Thank you. We good?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I've spoken enough.
Can we skip over to the ordinance discussion? Is that all right?
Is there any more public discussion?
Okay.
Is there any public comment regarding this? No, okay, so let's move on to discussion regarding updating ordinance. For the temporary preservation of certain historical structures subject to proposed demolition.
Well, this is something that is in our ordinance that we need. And we're proposed to update the ordinance and it's something that I think has been in the works or needed to be in the works for quite some time. So I think this and I believe our building official has pointed out that we're in violation of our ordinance. Having this
Having done which,
updated our ordinance.
oh, well. First, we need to decide how it should be updated. Well, there's been discussions about the fundamental flaw of this way that this the task of this committee is organized, which is that it occurs towards the end of the design process and is not really engaged with the decisions made early on and the expenses paid, so that was well illustrated in a recent project that we reviewed on Houston Street.
Well, yeah, I have a general question is, I think we can go through our ordinance and talk about items that should be improved or added or removed. But I know beyond, this has to go through a process at town council. And they have an ordinance committee. I don't know how this all happens. Other than us saying what we think. And so I actually would like to ask a member of town council who is present, Penny Young, if she could shed some light on that. How that process work.
Penny Young, Town Council. I think the process is for you to look at your ordinance, do some research on how other ordinances, in other municipalities are not just praised, but the various components of it, what kinds of authorities you are asking to be placed in your hands. As to, there's got to be something from general statutes at the state level, as well as case studies that have been tested in different municipalities. So since you are more the experts in this arena, I would suggest that you will have done all of that background and have it documented for the ordinance committee to then pursue their further study. Because I think that if you as knowledgeable individuals know what wording makes sense to you and what kinds of authorities you are seeking, be it already established by general statutes or legal procedures or something that you would like, taking the next step. That is certainly something that you all are more aware of than the ordinance committee themselves.
So we do our homework first.
I think you do your stuff first.
And I think candidly, the debate we had just previously or the discussion, I think I should say, with the representative of St. Aloysius shows one really glaring lack of authority in the ordinance here is that we impose the delay. And there's nothing in the ordinance currently to say what happens next.
That's right.
What do people have to do and not do? And under the current ordinance, section 7C, one of the duties and responsibilities that's been given to this committee is to reach out proactively to owners of significant structures and inform them of the tax benefits, grants, and economic, cultural, and aesthetic benefits of historic preservation, and to encourage the preservation, rehabilitation, and reuse of such structures. And I don't know whether that's been done or it hasn't been done, or it ought to be done in some more affirmative way. But it seems to me that if we use that as kind of a springboard to an imposition upon the applicants for demolition, because that was really the discussion that I was having with the representative of St. Aloysius, who has the burden of coming forward, who has the burden of doing whatever, who has the burden of proving what needs to be proven, and on what's the standard, whether that burden of proof has been met. Those things are left for argument. Now, that's wonderful for litigating lawyers, I can say, because as a litigating lawyer, that's what we make our money arguing with, where it isn't clear, but we should make it clear as to who has to do something, because again, I said it before, and I will repeat it even in her absence, I meant no disrespect to her in terms of what she did or did not do, because the ordinance isn't clear as to what the burden is on the owners. But the record before us, and I think anywhere, is that at least from the 1950s, that structure has been neglected and neglected and neglected. And that seems to be, from my perspective, the basic reason to take it down from the church's perspective. And that's something we ought to address more affirmatively, I think, in terms of the language of the ordinance. And there is, our secretary has provided a model from the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation that does in fact have some standards that impose burdens upon owners to do things and to interact with the committee and with the building officials of the town. Because as I said earlier, it's easier to just knock something down than to rehabilitate it. It's cheap, there's no doubt about it.
I think the other question is, what is the appetite for the town to do at this kind of thing? And that's really also plays into.
Well, as I was experiencing during, the recent presentation of a report to planning and zoning, I think that is one of the things that's lacking in your authority there. Once you impose a demolition delay, then what? I mean, nothing. I mean, not even to the point of, an obligatory report that has to be presented to planning and zoning. Does it have to be approved? Does it have any teeth to it? If there are other recommendations? And so those are the kinds of things that I think you will find from, general statutes and cases as to what authorities you have, either from a proactive standpoint or as a reactive standpoint. I know at some point recently, and when I say recently, I don't know what time frame is on recent, but the Historical Society did quite an extensive analysis of identifying all the houses in town that were 50 years, and older. But what does that do? Do you then have some formal process that you are in contact with the owners of those domiciles? Do you have any authorities to have periodic reviews that indeed they are maintaining those properties? I don't know what the authorities are, but I think now that you've had a couple cases recently, and one glaring one, in the library, it really brings to your attention that it's time to take this to a more definitive.
Well, the list is something also that's in our ordinance. The Historical Society has a list, the Preservation Alliance has done some surveys, in chunks around town. And that is another thing that we are supposed to be doing. That is something that the building official has reminded us of. And I believe it's something that would be helpful to have that resource when people do buy an old property or own it already, to know, because when you're saying that there is some burden on the owner, there needs to be something that says this property is historic, this property, we need to make that definitive statement. And so, it's just, which do we do first? Do we do the ordinance first? Do we do the list first? Both of them are a lot of time and energy. So, and need to be done very thoroughly and very
But what's your goal too, in the ordinance? What are you protecting? Just merely the fact that you have a list and you know what the structures are that exist in town?
That's one.
Or is that one, right? Is it to put any kinds of requirements of ownership and maintenance of a structure? That is another, is there another level of, if you're going to do something to the building, are there any preservation requirements on the structure? And who has the authority to enforce those? I mean, you know, we all have regulations on record where if you don't do whatever they say you do, there's a $500 penalty. Well, I mean, $500 is, you know, cost of doing business, and you just go ahead and do it and pay the $500. So things have got to have teeth to it, and if indeed. And in a relationship with planning and zoning, if indeed we want to have a town that protects our history, there's got to be some way of making it happen.
There's, it occurs to me that, in a private discussion weeks ago that I had with, Councilman Young, that it seemed to me, one of the things that might be lacking is that our decision to impose a 90-day delay has no evidentiary value or significance to P and Z's discussions. And that, even if the ordinance, even if that ordinance did no more than to shift the burden in some way, if this committee imposes a suspension, that has some significance on the determination made by P and Z beyond the oh, that's nice kind of comment that might be made. And I mean, no disrespect to P and Z, and they're hardworking folks and they try to do a good job there as well, but they don't have something that gives them authority to rely upon the decisions that we make in making their determination.
Precisely, and that was abundantly obvious that they sat there, they listened to your report, it wasn't even presented during a request on the agenda. It was, public delivery.
But that's also a problem with the sequence,
Yes,
Right.
because they've already made a decision. We're at the end of the whole process. And then what?
So then perhaps it should have been, written into the ordinance or any of P and Z's, and it's probably in both places that this is a requirement that planning and zoning go to you for the authentication of a structure or whatever. So I can see how it's got, multiple paths.
but it really does become a sequencing issue.
Yes,
Because, and without revisiting the library specifically, let's use the library as an example. When the first application was made by the library for whatever they wanted to do, if that included any portion of potentially included the demolition of a historic structure, that's when
it should have been.
the application should have been both here and there. And so that it could be, so that it's not as at least from my perspective, speaking as an individual, not as a member of this committee, it appeared to me that when the most recent applications were made, they were made in the context of, well, we've already decided this much and they've already gone this far, and therefore we gotta let them go the rest of the way because it's really already decided.
Well, I think this is triggered by the application for demolition.
Correct.
It's late. I wasn't
The very last thing.
Yeah,
But that's why I propose that there's a potential for demolition. And you'd have to say that in almost every circumstance, there's a potential for demolition. So that they should make an application, whether or not they're going to demolish or not, they should make the application and have the decision early on.
But know what that triggers.
You know that, what that triggers, and then if we go forward with the P and Z application, someone can say, well, have you made a demonstration to the Historic Review Committee because you have a potential for demolition, and get somebody on the record to say, no, there's not gonna be demolition. Just think how easy that'll be, to get somebody to say that. I don't think they will, because they'll make a representation on the record. Well, look, I can't say there won't be, but if you can't say there won't be, then that means you have to, with historic structures, but you have to make some application.
So the benefits of hindsight, and as painful as it has been, I think it triggers. Not just awareness, but actually some action items.
Right.
So we need to come up with some sort of a plan for going forward, you know, sitting down and reviewing this document. I actually have some suggestions from the former chairman about this, and I certainly looked at some, and the, I don't know. I do, like, we have this sample from Preservation Connecticut, and we do have to follow the state statute, and this all has to be done at a public meeting. So we need to come up with some sort of.
And I have some young lawyers willing to please me by looking at research from the
I would say
country.
it seems like a perfect project for an intern or, whatever, somebody who really has the wherewithal and inclination
Yeah, that's,
to dive into something like this. I
I've
think
done that to see if we can turn up stuff that will at least give us suggestions of what other people have done or not done. And how effective they've been.
I will mention that several years ago, maybe even before I was on this committee, a group did get together to try. It was representatives from the Historical Society, the Historic Review Committee, and Planning and Zoning.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we should approach planning and zoning and ask if they have someone that they would like.
I think
Because
that,
the two people who were in that
I think that
discussion.
would be great, and we can use an example that just happened 2 weeks ago where there was a discussion about affordable housing and the formation of an affordable housing committee,
Mhm.
right? And there were representatives from planning and zoning board of appeals and town council and the board of finance and the selectmen. And what came out of that meeting was a realization that if you have representation of all the parties involved in an issue, was a very, very productive meeting. And so if you're gonna form an affordable housing committee, you've gotta have a representative from each of the players in order to get something done, so that, well, no, I've already done that research and this is the result of it, or there's a hole here, we need to, fill in the hole. So the more people who were involved in this issue that you have sitting at the table, I think the more effective it's gonna be.
And personally, I think there needs to be a stronger tie between this committee and the Historic District Commission. I think,
It'd be the commission,
I think someone.
the planning and zoning, anybody who would be involved ultimately, I guess the building department, because they're the ones that issue demolition delay permits.
Mhm.
Health department, because there's some considerations. As is occurring right now with the library, they can't get a building, get a temporary or even permanent CO because they haven't fulfilled some health issues, so.
And should we have someone from the town council ordinance committee?
Yes, I almost think be aware of it and see whether or not they want to
Keep them
participate
in the
in this level, if it's forthcoming.
All right, so
So, good.
we'll try and.
If I can just have a moment, Rose. Penny, thank you. Mr. Whitmer, thank you. really appreciate your discussion and suggestions. I think that if Mr. Whitmer's suggestions are found to land someplace outside of our authority, that they should still be pursued. I think our biggest flaw is, as everyone has noted, being the last group of people in the process before construction project begins. And you know, maybe it does need to become a local ordinance or something to flag projects with potential demolition to meet with us or others, you know, in advance to look at this. And that there's one concern I have about lists, and I know lists are a requirement. I think there should be language that allows for the idea that there are buildings that are not on the list. Having a list also gives the danger that someone can quickly look through the list and say, well, our building wasn't on it, so we didn't think we had to do anything. So that
Your point is a good one. I was thinking that language should say that any list must explicitly say that this is not exclusive, and the absence of any structure being on the list is not a representation or an acceptance of the non-historic nature of any building. I'm sorry.
If no
There's
legalese in it.
There's a reason people need lawyers, and that's just one of them. But it's a very, very good point. You do not want to say, these are the historic buildings, and have somebody say, oh, gee, this is not, I ain't on a list, so I can take it down. No, yeah, it's a very good point.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we think about organizing something for our next meeting, or what are you?
Yeah, we should. I think we should be given some homework. I don't, you know, I guess we're going to all be doing this, so there's no point in having a committee, but I think it would be good to have a point person who I would recommend Mr. Whitmer be the point person to give us, to, you know, set up some sort of a process here and make assignments. Does that make sense?
What I personally was thinking that I would do, and I offered to do this, because I think the point was made that this may go outside our authority. But it doesn't, it's not outside our authority to recommend ordinance changes just generally that would assist us, because it may be that we would need to put something into the authority given P and Z to do this. And I think that kind of a general look at the underlying statutory support for the authority of this committee, the Historic District Commission. Has to be careful with commissions and committees and the commission and P and Z to see how we can effectively coordinate the intersection and interaction of these different heads of authority to achieve the goal that seems to be the consensus that we want to achieve.
Yeah, it's not gonna be an easy one, because I mean, P and Z functions along certain quantifiable values or issues, like, you know, is this, you know, some distance away from the property line or not? I mean, so they're very black and white issues, whereas we are putting forth much more interpretive kind of.
I agree with you, but for example, and I'm going to give an example based upon my own personal experience. There is in the ordinance that I think it's called an auxiliary dwelling.
Yeah.
An auxiliary dwelling can only fit a certain definition of size and coverage and so on. But it says that it should be in a style and so on that is consistent with the main dwelling, which is interpreted.
Yeah.
Very
Well, so there is room for that.
So there's room for that in this sense, and I think there's some other aspects in terms of there's, I think you can only have one driveway must support both structures, but you can only, I'm sorry, you have two driveways to support the structures, but they can only have access to one right of way. So there are lots of interpretive things that can be developed, can use as the basis of doing this. I think it's it's kind of an interesting assignment to see how we can harmonize these things consistently with their authority, our authority, and our purposes.
Yeah, no, that's a challenge.
I like to say, if it were easy, it wouldn't need us.
What is the actual authority of the commission?
I don't know the answer to that.
In relationship to P and Z.
In relationship to any?
Well, it's
It's a whole other ordinance.
They have a whole
A
other
lot more
ordinance.
detailed now,
yes.
a lot more expensive
What
than
is
ours.
Yeah, what are they allowed to do, or what do they do?
Well, I think the major. This is highly relevant to the discussion, because the Historic District Commission has a set procedure of how they designate something to be a historic district. And once they've designated something to be a historic district and the procedure is met, and it is declared a historic district, then anything that is within that district has certain burdens placed on it to keep it up. And there is this kind of discussion we had with St. Aloysius, there is an affirmative burden on owners within there to come forward and to do things not far short of demolition, that you cannot, or permitted from doing things far short of demolition. And that's, I by no means am telling you what all the details of their authority is or where it comes from, but that I do know there's a procedure of how you go about and how they are permitted to declare something a historic district, but once that's done.
But it's just a historic district.
Correct.
On the old houses.
Correct. It's the historic district. And I can tell you, when I owned a house in Wilton that was built in 1739, there was an effort to put a historic district where it was something the same. This is
I had the same problem. I had a house in Milton.
right.
On 7.
Right, well, and once it's declared that, it becomes you are really constrained with respect to what you can do both inside and outside in terms of renovating the house. And then they show me on the inside. This not, it's interpreted.
Yeah,
It's interpreted,
yeah, the commission it's what you can see from the public way.
correct,
That's the,
correct. I agree with that. Others might.
okay, all right.
Broaden.
Listen, I need to,
Yeah, we need to
Head out.
wrap it up then here.
right,
Do we want to do the officer election or we want to?
When are we postponed to a later meeting?
That's fine. Can I nominate you as the head of the ordinance revision
You just.
subcommittee? And you'll give us our marching
Yes,
orders
yes.
and
okay.
we can be working on that and then meet next month.
Good.
All right.
And- Okay.
Motion move to adjourn, all in favor?
I.
All right.
You're in the committee for the day.
How did we do this before 11?
It was just irresistible to say. God, all things are fine. It was good. I'm sincere, it's not.
He didn't react to it. It's pretty stone faced.
Yes, well, that's okay. That's all right.